Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome or welcome back to Season 3 of the Logical Christian Podcast. I'm your Logical Christian, Dan Irwin. The Logical Christian Podcast is not here to tell you what to think. It's an exercise in how to think. Rather than just accept what we're being told with regard to current events, politics, science, religion, and everything else, we're going to stop the spin, ask questions, dive deep, and look at the world logically. And since logic is a gift from God, most importantly, we're going to look at it all as Christians. Links can be found in the show notes if you'd like to follow along. So with that, let's go be logical Christians. Well, as with all things, there comes a point where the end must come. And with a heavy heart, that means this podcast as well. So don't get the wrong idea. This is not of my doing. Have you heard of this eclipse thing? I sure hope you listen to this episode first thing Monday morning, because when you start to look at the prophecies being fulfilled, the state of the earth, the way this eclipse and others have crisscrossed the United States, I think it's pretty clear that God has shown us the signs in the heavens through the stars. Remember, sun is a star, just as he promised. And have you heard of the red heifer that has been brought to the location of the temple in Israel and will be sacrificed to cleanse the grounds for the temple to be rebuilt? Yeah, I fully expect for me to be gone, raptured this very afternoon. As we find in the oracles of Second Egon, quote, human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. And that's where we are, my friends. So now, I feel it's my duty to spend our time, as little as it is, exegeting the prophecies, parsing through the scriptures, arriving at logical assumptions, developing illogical contradictions, etc., etc. Nah, never mind. Let's take our chances. And this is just another eclipse like all the others because, God set the stars, planets, and moons in their orbits and sustains his creation with exacting precision. Let's just do the same thing we always do. On today's episode, we're actually, as Providence would have it, going to talk about stars. Many stars. And then we're going to try to find some sort of happiness in this dumb, stupid country of ours. And finally, it's Berean time. So, grab your solar glasses and let's stare at quadrillions of suns, then wipe that smile off your face. You have neither right nor reason to be so happy. And finally, see if you can get that practically new, barely used Bible to crack open just a little bit. Let's take a look, see what's inside that beautiful leather-bound thing. Now, before it all goes dark and the world ends for about 3 minutes, here we go. Quote, one of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. Quote, nothing disturbs me more than the glorification of stupidity. I feel these quotes to the very core of my being. The problem I have with them is who said them. Carl Sagan, the astronomer focused primarily on the possibility of extraterrestrial life, television personality, oft misquoted as saying billions and billions of stars, host of the TV show Cosmos, who died back in 1996, about a month after turning 62. Sagan was a very smart man, apparently a very compelling communicator, was very anti-religion. Now, he never would have actually said that, but he placed his faith in science and nature, discounting an all-powerful deity. Quote, how is it that hardly any major religion has looked at science and concluded, this is better than we thought? The universe is much bigger than our prophets said, grander, more subtle, more elegant. Instead, they say, no, my God is a little God, and I want him to stay that way. The idea that God is an oversized white male with a flowing beard who sits in the sky and tallies the fall of every sparrow is ludicrous. But if by God one means the set of physical laws that govern the universe, then clearly there is such a God. This God is emotionally unsatisfying. It does not make much sense to pray to the law of gravity. What I'm saying is, if God wanted to send us a message and ancient writings were the only way he could think of doing it, he could have done a better job. And I think one of his most ironic quotes, quote, you can't convince a believer of anything, for their belief is not based on evidence, it's based on a deep-seated need to believe. Well, for over 27 years now, Carl Sagan has been a denier of the religion of evolution and is an absolute believer in the God of the Christian Bible. Unfortunately, his transition in his belief came too late. And although Sagan never really had an impact on my life personally, he is, at least for my and older generations, the individual we often think of when we hear something about how many stars are in the universe. I wonder what he would think of the amazing discoveries being made today. I wonder what he'd like to come back and tell the world about the size of the Christian God and his creation today, knowing what he knows now. In this segment, I want to take a look at some of God's stellar handiwork, all summed up in a short sentence fragment at the end of Genesis 1, verse 16, and he made the stars also. So we know that what we call stars are actually suns, or maybe more accurately, our sun is simply a star that happens to be, the perfect size and perfect temperature, the perfect brightness. Our planet's orbit happens to be in that perfect location at the perfect combination of rotation about the sun and rotation about its axis with, of course, the perfect atmosphere, perfect moon at the perfect location, perfect hydrologic cycle, perfect density to give us the perfect amount of gravity, the perfect polar magnetism, and the list goes on. Isn't random chance and order coming from chaos all by itself an amazing thing? But remember, this sun is simply a star, and not the largest or the brightest star either. It's just an average, churning, burning star in a vast cosmic ocean of, nobody really knows how many stars. The most current estimate I could find from mid-2023 was 300 sextillion stars. That's 300 with 21 zeros following it. Interestingly, Carl Sagan never did say the billions and billions of stars thing. Actually, Johnny Carson said that as a parody of Sagan. Sagan actually said that there were 10 billion trillion stars, which works out to about 10 sextillion. So, he was only off by a factor of 30 as compared to this latest estimate. To give you an idea of how many stars are out there, if the 300 sextillion number is correct, then every single person out of the 8 billion people on Earth could own about 37.5 trillion stars. I'd need more closet space. But just recently, March 2024, found on space.com, headline, scientists find galaxy supercluster as massive as 26 quadrillion suns. Of course, there is no real counting that goes on here. What astronomers do is a series of calculations based on rotation speed of the galaxy, brightness, etc., and they come up with an approximation of how many stars must be in that galaxy. Now, for our galaxy, the Milky Way, which is also a delicious snacky treat, nobody really knows which one was named first. Chicken and the egg scenario, really. The estimate is between 100 and 400 billion stars. So just a little tiny fella, to be honest. So astronomers have discovered 662 new galaxy superclusters, which are collections of galaxies, clustered together, I guess, superly. The one in question is named the Inasto supercluster, named, of course, for astrophysicist Jan Inasto, who was, quote, one of the discoverers of the large-scale structure of the universe. I have no idea what that means. I kind of thought that we knew the universe was large. Maybe we didn't, and maybe Jan cleared things up for us. I'm not sure. Anyway, the supercluster is about 3 billion light years from Earth and is so wide it would take light 360 million years to travel from one side of the supercluster to the other. So to try to give you some perspective, our sun is about 8.2 light minutes away from us, meaning that when we see the sun, when we stare directly at the sun, we're looking at it as it was 8.2 minutes ago. That 8.2 minutes is what it takes for the light of the sun to travel just under 93 million miles. So 360 million light years across is about 6 trillion miles, give or take. That's a lot of miles. To try to count the number of stars in the galaxy, scientists have come up with a method of approximating the mass of the galaxy. This is what I mentioned a few moments ago, taking into account light and rotation speed, etc. When looking at all of these 662 newly discovered superclusters, the average is about 2,000 times larger than the Milky Way. The average for each of them, 2,000 times larger than the Milky Way. Or to put that in perspective, quote, if the sun were the same mass as a golf ball, one of these superclusters would have the same mass as Mount Everest. They also estimated or calculated or Magic guesstimated that the galaxies in the interior of the supercluster are heavier than those on the outside of the supercluster. Now, what does this mean? No idea. What do you think it means? What do they think it means? I don't know. Quote, this demonstrates that galaxies in superclusters grow and evolve differently from galaxies outside such environments. Yes, the ever malleable, choose-your-own-adventure book called Evolution. Then the article discusses how the densities of these superclusters tell us something about dark matter, which we've discussed before in the past. I don't know. It's a mythical, invisible matter that scientists theorize exists because what they see in the universe doesn't make sense with regard to gravitational fields and rate of separation over time, etc., unless there is some other form of matter out there that we can't see. And what's funny is that not only are they not able to explain our universe without hypothesizing some invisible substance, some invisible force, well, these galaxies in the newly discovered superclusters don't work correctly in a different way than our galaxy doesn't work correctly, which means their theory of dark matter doesn't work the same here as it would have to work there, which means they need to back up one or two choices in their book and choose a different path for dark matter for these superclusters than what they choose for the Milky Way. The lengths we go in order to prove that everything happened by chance. To me, and you can call me crazy if you'd like, please do it behind my back, not to my face, I have fragile emotions. If these things in the universe don't act the way we expect, and we have to invoke an invisible force that guides and maintains the galaxies, why wouldn't the concept of an all-powerful intelligent designer at least be on the table? At this point, it wouldn't even have to be the Christian God, just a being, just a higher power. Can we not even start there? And no, we can't. They reference an article in this article regarding the James Webb Space Telescope, so let's go there next. Also found on space.com, headline, Speck of light glimpsed by Hubble is truly an enormous old galaxy. James Webb Space Telescope reveals. So this is exactly what the headline said. The Hubble Space Telescope found a spot of light somewhere out there a while back, and now the James Webb has revealed that that speck is apparently a huge galaxy, which they've appropriately named capital G lowercase z 9 lowercase p3. Because what else could you possibly name a discovery like this? Am I right? The claim is that it is, quote, seen as it was just 510 million years after the Big Bang. That's during the relative infancy of the universe, which is now 13.8 billion years old. So, it's just a little baby galaxy. Or, not exactly, as it's apparently, quote, far more massive and mature than expected for a galaxy in the infant universe during the ancient time period in which it's been spotted. It already appears to contain several billion stars. They go on to say further, quote, not only is it more massive than expected, but it is around 10 times more massive than other galaxies that JWST has seen in similar eras of the universe's history. So they believe that what they're actually seeing are two infant galaxies in the process of colliding and merging. They believe this because of the complex shape and two bright spots. My question is, how would these smash into each other? If the Big Bang is really how the universe started, which is nothing but an explosion from a single point, and space is a vacuum, everything should move out and away from each other forever. None of these particles should have ever collided or combined to form anything or interact in any way. But if you look into the Big Bang Theory, these scientists that absolutely believe in the theory of uniformity, that is, that everything worked back then the exact same way it works today, with one exception, about a trillionth of a second long, or something like that if I remember correctly, after the Big Bang, when the laws of physics were apparently suspended. Because they need, I guess let's call it a miracle, in order to even give their theory a chance. Continuing on, they use the JWST to perform a spectroscopic analysis, which in the case of imaging has to do with basically analyzing colors to try to determine the elements present in these distant stars. The theory is that stars, as they mature, go through a process of fusing elements, moving from hydrogen to helium and on into various metals, with iron being the heaviest and final element that can be fused inside of stars, which would indicate, of course, an old or a mature star. So is this true? I don't know. I'll be honest, never looked into the theory of what happens in the nucleus of stars and how much is theoretical, how much is experimental, but let's just, for our sake here, let's take it for granted that this is correct. What they found is that this very early galaxy seems to have a, quote, population of old stars, much larger than previously suspected. This means that while the astronomers have been aware of the cycle of stellar life and death and increasing metal enrichment of subsequent generations of stars, the capital G lowercase z 9 lowercase p3 observations indicate galaxies may have become chemically mature faster than had been suspected previously. And because of the choose-your-own-adventure nature of evolution, quote, these observations provide evidence of a rapid, efficient buildup of stars and metals in the immediate aftermath of the Big Bang, tied to ongoing galaxy mergers, demonstrating that massive galaxies with several billion stars existed earlier than expected. Of course they did. Sure they did. Now, we know that now. You know, I keep saying that evolution is a choose-your-own-adventure book, and it is, but really it's more like a choose-your-own-adventure book knowing what pages you need to get to in order to get the result you want. It's like going through a maze backwards. You know, most of the problematic dead ends are really obvious doing that, so you just don't choose those paths. In other words, they know that the Big Bang is true. They know that evolution is true. They know how stars form and mature and form other stars. They know how galaxies form, so no matter what they discover, one way or another will absolutely be evidence for their predetermined conclusion. They go on to explain how exactly these stars matured so rapidly, so early on, that they just discovered, obviously matured faster than their theory, which was the prevailing theory up to the point when they discovered these matured stars, because unless you're a dummy head, this is quite obvious, especially when the discovery doesn't fit the current theory, right? So this happens, of course, obviously, when galaxies collide. See, even the Milky Way formed this way, with a series of galaxy mergers. When galaxies merge elements, the gases, it promotes rapid star formation and maturation, and can even kickstart a galaxy into star creation when it was lying dormant prior to the collision. You see, quote, the Milky Way currently forms stars at a stunted rate, so stunted we don't even see it, but this will change when it collides with our neighboring galaxy Andromeda. In about 4.5 billion years, this will cause an influx of gas that kicks off a fresh bout of starburst. And I sure hope it's the pink starburst, because I think that's pretty much universally agreed to be the best of the starburst flavors. Quote, these observations of capital G, lowercase z, 9 lowercase p3 show that galaxies were able to accumulate mass quickly in the early universe through mergers, with star formation efficiencies higher than we expected. This and other observations using the JWST are causing astrophysicists to adjust their modeling of the early years of the universe. So their model was wrong. Wait a minute, no. Quote, our cosmology isn't necessarily wrong, but our understanding of how quickly galaxies formed probably is, because they are more massive than we ever believed could be possible. So their theory on creation, efficiency, and overall speed was wrong, because their theory of early galaxy mass and size was wrong, but their cosmology, which is the study of all of that, is still fine. Don't worry about it. Look, what's that over there? Oh, don't worry, it's just science. Is this kind of thing allowed anywhere else, really? And yes, it is. Climate change, for one. That's another area of faux science that uses data, observations, assumptions, models, gets it completely wrong just all of the time, but the theory of climate change can't be wrong, so they just adjust their models. Now, I know that I may fight for my right to party and also my right to be right on something, but after being shown and proven I'm wrong, I don't have a lot of options left. I need to admit I'm wrong, correct my thinking, and move on with life, mostly in shame, but not science, or at least not evolutionary or climate science. Those are never wrong. They're just constantly being updated to correct the never-ending errors, inaccuracies, and miscalculations and blunders that pervade and infest the entire theory. But while we're generally in the area of the early Milky Way galaxy with its delicious nougaty center forming from the collision of early galaxies, we might as well tackle one more article just for fun. Found on IndianExpress.com, headline, Max Planck scientists find Shiva and Shakti earliest building blocks of Milky Way. So the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy, a research institute in Heidelberg, Germany, just discovered like a few weeks ago, very possibly the earliest building blocks of the Milky Way galaxy. They appear to be two galaxies that merged about 12 to 13 billion years ago. They combine data from the European Space Agency's Gaia satellite, which was launched in 2013 in order to measure positions, distances, and motions of stars, and the SDSS, the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which was a very detailed, high-level project started in the year 2000, imaging stars, specifically looking at redshift, or the motion of stars. Using this combined data, they found what they call traces of what they believe remains of these two early galaxies. They chose to name these two galaxies Shiva and Shakti. Now, we've already covered the absolute fact that stars may or may not form quickly, and that they may or may not mature quickly, and that those colliding galaxies may or may not kickstart star formation, or maybe not. So we know those facts. No need to go over those again. What I wanted to mention was the naming, the meaning of the names that they're using here. Let's start with the Gaia satellite. Gaia is the name of a Greek primordial goddess. Legend says that she arose to the everlasting seat of the immortals who possess Olympus. After she arose, which I guess equates to being born-ish, Tartarus in the depths of the wide-pathed earth arose, and then Eros, the god of love. Gaia somehow brought forth her son, Uranus, to cover her on every side. Think of Uranus as the sky in heavens, not the planet. She also apparently gave birth to Aurea, meaning mountains, and Pontus, or the sea. She apparently did this, quote, without sweet union of love. In other words, she don't need no man. Then she did need a man, that man being her son, Uranus, to give birth to the Titans, namely Ocanus and Coeus and Creus and Hyperion, Lapetus, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Menisnene, Phoebe, Tethys, and finally Kronos, who apparently hated her. But although her son, who was also her son's son, or her grandson, Kronos, hated her, well, her son, Uranus, did not. He was her jam, as it were. So later, she and he got it on even more, giving birth to Cyclopes. Yep, that's the one-eyed fellow, the Cyclops, and a number of others. So you kind of get the idea that this European Space Agency satellite is named after some sort of cosmic, mythological, perverted, twisted goddess of creation. Let's move to the alleged galaxy they named Shiva. Shiva is a Hindu god known by a lot of names, primary among them being the god of destruction or the destroyer, also the god of time, lord of yogis, the cosmic dancer, patron of yoga, might want to take note there, meditation and arts, master of poison and medicine. Shiva is one of the Hindu trinity, although the Hindu religion has about 330 million gods, give or take. But this trinity is considered kind of the main three, the primary, right? Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu. Brahma is considered the creator of the universe, who's most often depicted sitting on a lotus flower. He can't be worshipped on his own, however, because of some curse. He must be worshipped as part of the trinity. He has 4 heads and 4 hands, because why would he not? He doesn't incarnate himself on earth, and he's the least popular of the 3. Vishnu is considered the protector of the universe. He's depicted as lying on the bed of a snake on the sea of milk, with his goddess wife, Lakshmi, pressing his legs. Yeah, I don't know what that means either. Some consider him to be the supreme god. He incarnates on earth as evil starts to rise on the earth so he can rid the earth of the evil. Shiva is the destroyer, as I mentioned. He's very popular, apparently. He mostly just meditates, carrying a moon on his forehead and a snake around his neck. He has 4 hands and 5 heads. Are you seeing the parallels with the scriptures at all? I mean, there's a trinity of gods, not the same, parallel concept. You've got the protector, a destroyer, few snakes thrown in there. And then we move to Shakti. Shakti is a goddess associated essentially with cosmic energy, encompassing energy, ability, strength, effort, power, and capability. Strong female character. The worship of Shaktism or Shaktiism, not sure which, is one that worships the dynamic forces that permeate the universe. She is often considered the consort of Shiva, thus the Shiva and Shakti names of the supposed galaxies or galaxy that gave birth to the Milky Way. Isn't it interesting, the very pagan nature of evolutionary exploration? When you research the naming that's been given, it kind of makes capital G, lowercase z9, lowercase p3 look better and better, doesn't it? So Genesis 1:16 tells us that God made the stars. We're told that he knows the names of every single one. Maybe not what we name them, like capital G, lowercase z9, lowercase p3, or, the names of pagan gods, but he knows their actual name. One day we'll know the names of the stars, or at least we'll probably know the names of some of the stars, the real names of the stars. We know that naming the stars and constellations is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The constellations Orion and Pleiades are named a few times in the Bible, as early as the book of Job, generally agreed to be one of the earliest books in the Bible. Orion, or the hunter, you want to think of Orion's belt, which is a straight line of 3 stars, and if you follow that line of stars farther off into the sky, you come to a cluster of 7 stars, the 7 sisters, or the Pleiades. God asked Job if he could bind the chains of the Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion, which of course neither Job nor we are able to affect the stars in any way, no matter what we do. The whole book of Job is primarily about God's sovereignty over all things, including every single star. For a long time I had 2 thoughts as to how God placed the stars. One is how I defined the Big Bang. He gave the command for stars and boom! The sky lit up as trillions of stars burst into being, started rotating, started orbiting in their galaxies. Just a massive sound as the universe exploded into light. Now, yes, I know that in space nobody can hear you scream, but I kind of think that something like this would have done all sorts of things we can't replicate. My other view is where God placed every single star in its exact location. Of course, with 300 sextillion stars that we think we know of, and a 24-hour creation day, maybe it's more of the first way than the second. But there's no doubt that every single star, every single galaxy was placed in the absolute perfect position, precisely not a fraction of an inch from where God wanted it. David in Psalm 8, glorifying God for the creation, says, quote, "When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have established, what is man that you remember him, and the son of man that you care for him?" The stars were placed, we learn in Genesis 1, along with the sun and the moon, for lights, for signs of seasons and days and years, and ultimately they're there for God's glory, for us to look up and give God all glory and worship for his omnipotence, his creation. And yet God values man infinitely more than these sextillions of massive burning balls of whatever they are. But just as Satan asked Eve, did God say, Satan has done the same thing with creation. We worship the creation rather than the creator. We look to the stars for signs of evolution. We look to them to divine our future. Satan has taken a majestic work of God and convinced us that they, not some magical sky god, need to be worshipped. Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, in the final days of his life, as he was recounting to the Israelites everything from the Exodus out of Egypt up to their current point in time, soon to have a new patriarch, a new leader, cross over and enter the promised land, as he was exhorting them to keep the laws and commands from Yahweh, he said this, quote, "So keep your souls very carefully, since you did not see any form on the day Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make a graven image for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water below the earth, and lest you lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which Yahweh your God has apportioned for all the people under the whole heaven." And that's exactly what they did after a relatively short period of time, and that's exactly what we've done. And when I say we, I mean humanity in general. Claiming to be wise, we become fools and traded the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. And because we've chosen a lie over the truth of God and his creation, well, God gave us up. Thankfully, he made a way for his children, his elect, to escape this curse, this death sentence. Now, the universe is an amazing place. Think about it. 300 sextillion stars that we know of. A supercluster galaxy with 24 quadrillion stars, or 26 a lot of quadrillion stars, that dwarfs our galaxy, which is already unfathomably huge. Each point of light in the sky, another sun, likely bigger than our own, multiple light years away from Earth, all placed in one 24-hour day by a command from God, recorded forever in history as He made the stars also. And we have no idea how many stars and galaxies that we don't know about. The unsaved, the evolutionary scientists, they are well aware of how amazing this universe is, at least in the scope, the size, the complexity. The saved, those who believe the Bible as written, a young creation account of the scriptures, stars created in no more than a single day, we know that it's beyond amazing. It's quite literally miraculous, all put there for us. God didn't need to create all of the stars and galaxies. He placed them there for our pleasure, for our use, for Him to display His omnipotence, and ultimately for His glory. So next time we look up and see the stars, let's offer up praise to God for His sparkling, twinkling, incomprehensible creation. Well, here we are again. It's that time of year. The World Happiness Report has been released for 2024. Did you remember to put up your annual World Happiness Report tree? This report comes out as part of a collaboration of Gallup, the Oxford Wellbeing Research Centre. The Centre, of course, is spelled Britishly, Centre, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and who doesn't just love everything that comes out of the UN, and the World Happiness Report's editorial board. As we know, happiness is probably one of the most important things in the world today. The lyrical maestro, if you will, Pharrell Williams, in his awe-inspiring poetry set to music entitled Happy, I think captures it best when he says, quote, "It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air like I don't care, baby, by the way." I'm not sure how going to space in a hot air balloon would make you happy. Seems like it would make you dead, but maybe I'm wrong. Then the chorus, "Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof." Again, this doesn't seem to make me happy. As a homeowner, a room without a roof, that's more broke and depressed, I think. I digress. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. And then he has another verse. Then he has a bridge that says nothing twice. Then the chorus, also twice, then the bridge once more, then the chorus twice again, and then that's all. That's the entire song. And to be honest, the song kind of makes you happy. It's a fun little song. There's nothing wrong with it necessarily. It's got a great beat to it. If I wasn't so white, it's so white that I'm almost clear, in fact, and plus the compromised joints due to the heft, I could probably get on the dance floor and boogie down to it. But in the nonsense lyrics, I find two of them the most interesting. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth, and then if you know what happiness is to you. So happiness is subjective and relative. You know what makes you happy, and it may be something that totally irritates me, but you know what it is to you. So this lyric is a good lyric. That said, if you know that happiness is the truth, is it? And if it is, the truth of what? Exactly. In fact, happiness could be a complete and total lie. A lot of people turn to things like drugs and alcohol, sex, or other forms of debauched methods of attaining temporary happiness, and quite often these things do bring a temporary euphoria, but the happiness it promises is a lie. And because happiness is not a real thing, it's a fickle feeling, can we even trust this World Happiness Report? This year, it made more headlines than normal, at least in the United States, because the United States has fallen out of the top 20 happiest countries in the world for the first time ever. Now, for some of us, this may come as a shock, as in, we were in the top 20 happiest countries prior to this year? The heck you say? Now, some of us are likely surprised that we're not number one year after year after year, which we aren't, and I don't think we've ever been. Of course, every news outlet has their own slant and spin on why we're not happy. Nothing to do with flying a hot air balloon to space, from what I can see. It's more based on political slant as to why they speculate we're not a happy country. Found on NBCnews.com, headline, "The U.S. is no longer one of the 20 happiest countries. If you're young, you probably know why." I used to be young once. Looking back, those seem like simpler, maybe happier days. But no, I think I'm wrong. Quote, "In a gaping disparity, Americans over 60 are some of the world's happiest, while those under 30 are among the most miserable in the developed world." The wording is so carefully chosen to evoke exactly the emotion they're looking for. It's impressive, if I'm being honest. So apparently the U.S. isn't the only country just tumbling. Some European countries are falling as well. The U.S. is sitting at 23rd overall, falling from 15th last year. That's a pretty big drop. But when you break it down by age, they found that we're in the top 10 for those over 60, but we're 62nd for those under 30. NBC then states, quote, "The report tracks trends and well-being rather than causes, but one of the editors of the report told NBC News that a myriad of factors, including economic inequality between generations in the U.S., are likely to blame for the low levels of happiness in American youth." So, they don't cover causes, but you've got someone willing to just throw out a baseless assumption, and not just an assumption that seems to correlate with exactly what NBC likes to promote, a socialist Marxist worldview, the worldview that's incidentally held by Democrats. Rather volatile worldview that's meant to incite unrest and agitation, and they wonder why the younger generation is unhappy. Mystery. The report apparently found that this trend of the younger generations being less happy than the older is also found in Canada, Germany, and France. We'll cover that shortly. NBC's source turns out to be Jean-Emmanuel Deneuve, a professor of economics and behavioral science at Oxford, and one of the editors of the report. He further says, quote, "When it comes to the tanking youth happiness in the U.S., there is not a single smoking gun, but it is likely due to a combination of many factors, ranging from political polarization to overuse of social media to uncertainty about the future and growing economic inequality between generations, with people under 30 struggling to get into the real estate ladder. It's a very complex time for youth, with lots of pressures and a lot of demands for their attention." Conversely now, we see some Central and Eastern European countries moving up in happiness, and Deneuve recommends we see what they're doing. Maybe try to take some advice from countries like Lithuania. Of course, the Nordic countries are always ranked at the top. Finland ranks as the happiest year after year. Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, they're always high and are again this year. Oddly enough, these all have various forms of socialist governmental systems. We're always told that they're the happiest and we should learn from them. Why are these the happiest? Well, don't worry, Deneuve has some speculation for that question as well. And no, he says nothing about a room without a roof, oddly enough. Quote, "The consistently high performance of Scandinavian nations is likely due to a high sense of contentment and high levels of trust in the society. They're obviously wealthy nations," he added, "but more than the high gross domestic product per capita," he said, "wealth is also equally distributed. They are amongst the most equal societies, so everybody benefits from the wealth that also underpins a welfare state, which provides psychological stability." See? Socialism works! Equal societies, equal wealth distribution, they all get along because they're happy. You can clap along if you'd like. If only the United States would go more socialist, things would be great. It seems like they're just kind of making assumptions as they go along, to be honest. And let me say this, assumptions are fine when it comes to analyzing data, but if you don't have the data to back up those assumptions, you need to be very, very clear about that, or else you'll have something like, well, like what NBC News simply used here, using your words to promote their agenda. Now, I'm not reading the 158-page report, so I don't know if they're crystal clear on the assumptions they're making or not, but it doesn't sound like Mr. Deneuve is clear. Now, before we just make a blanket statement that socialism is the way to go, that we should all just be like Scandinavia, there are a few key differences we should probably keep in mind. The United States has 335 million people. Finland has 5.6 million people. Denmark has 5.9 million. Iceland has a whopping 376,000 people. Sweden has 10.5 million people. And yes, that makes a massive difference in how you handle your country and your population. The United States is the most diverse country of its size, although there are other countries much smaller that are listed as being the most diverse. But when you look into the data, it doesn't really appear that they are. They just consist of multiple indigenous tribes. So the United States is currently made up of about 58% white, 19% Latino, 12% black, 6% Asian. And then I'm sorry for lumping everyone else together, but this is how the data comes. Multiple backgrounds, Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other make up another 5.5%. Additionally, about 78.5% primarily speak English, 13.2% speak Spanish, with the remaining 8% speaking other primarily. Finland is made up of about 91% Finnish background, with 86% speaking Finnish primarily. Denmark is 86% Danish. I could definitely use a cream cheese Danish if I'm being completely honest, and nearly all of them speak Danish as their primary language. Iceland is made up of 94% Icelandic natives, with nearly all of them speaking Icelandic. And Sweden is about 75% Swedes, with the vast majority speaking, you guessed it, Swedish. The point in covering those demographics is to show that the United States is not the same. To make generic assumptions and conclusions without taking into account the demographics is just plain silly and dangerous if the data is used wrongly. The United States is unique in the world. The combination of diversity and population size is found nowhere else in the world. This simply means that you can't just blindly apply what works for one country to another country. So you may be able to apply what works in Finland to, say, Sweden, but that doesn't mean it applies anywhere else or everywhere for sure. So looking at the report, there are a few interesting bullet points with regards to kids. Quote, globally, young people aged 15 to 24 still report higher life satisfaction than older adults, but this gap is narrowing in Western Europe and recently reversed in North America due to falling life satisfaction among the young. Conversely, in sub-Saharan Africa, life satisfaction has increased among the young. Next bullet point, quote, overall, globally, young people aged 15 to 24 experienced improved life satisfaction between 2006 and 2019 and stable life satisfaction since then, but the picture varied by region. Youth well-being fell in North America, Western Europe, Middle East and North Africa, and South Asia. In the rest of the world, it rose. Next point, quote, turning to younger ages, 10 to 15, evidence is limited. In high-income countries, life satisfaction has declined since 2019, especially for girls. For East Asian countries, life satisfaction increased in 2019. Before 2019, the evidence on trends is mixed. And the last bullet point, quote, girls report lower life satisfaction than boys by around the age of 12. This gap widens at ages 13 and 15, and the pandemic has amplified the difference. These points apply only to high-income countries since data on these young ages is rarely gathered elsewhere. For ages 15 to 24, global data shows no global gender differences from 2006 until 2013, but from 2014, females began reporting higher life satisfaction than males, although the gap has narrowed after the pandemic. This global gender gap masks regional differences and is more pronounced in lower-income countries. There are no gender differences in high-income countries. Okay. When you start looking at some of the data, out of the top 30 happiest countries, 16 countries, including the United States, show a general progression where the older are happier, and as you go younger, you get to the least happy. Not all are exactly like the U.S., but they're generally close. 9 of the top 30 show the happiest as the youngest, the least happiest as the oldest. So what does this tell us? Well, I have some ideas. But first, listen to the countries that show the same general trend as the United States of older, happier, younger, less happy. Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Netherlands, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, United States, Germany, France, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore. Except for a few countries, most of those kind of fit together, don't they? Kind of first world, modern, Western mindset type of countries. Now, how about the countries with the happiest being the young and the least happiest the old? The other 9 countries I mentioned: Israel, Luxembourg, Costa Rica, Austria, Czechia, Lithuania, Slovenia, Mexico, and Kosovo. Again, some outliers out there, but we see Eastern nations and some Latin nations. Here's the reality. Money and money equality isn't the key to happiness. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and older people should statistically have more money than younger people. I mean, older people have worked longer, had longer time to save and invest, right? It should be harder for younger people to get into real estate, or as we normies would say it, buy a house. This aspect may cause more unhappiness in Western-minded younger people simply because all the messaging is telling them that not only should they be able to afford and have everything they desire right now, but that it's the older people that are hoarding the money and ruining their lives. In the countries showing the younger are the happiest, I'd be willing to wager that that messaging isn't happening. I'd also argue that in the Western nations, we're in the business of telling kids they're unhappy, and business is good. Yes, social media is definitely a player in this, and although I adamantly disagree with the government-mandated bans on social media platforms, generally speaking, I do believe that they need to be managed. Now, to what degree varies, and I'll be the first to admit that I would consider myself a failure as a parent on this point, but beyond that, it seems like the concept of suck it up, buttercup doesn't exist anymore. The idea of hard times creates strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. That holds true. And I believe that kids these days, the preteen to probably early 20s, are in a transition phase between being weak because of good times and becoming strong because of the hard times. We're in kind of a weird period in history, I think. But kids are being told generally that such and such is how their world should be, and if it isn't that way, well, we must find coping mechanisms. And I say that with complete knowledge that times for kids are probably the hardest they've been, at least in recent history. My guess is that kids in the other group have a much more realistic worldview, as they're living in countries that don't have the social media presence and don't have all of the amenities and luxuries those in the Western world do. One more practical issue, let's look at this latest contagion in the West, the LGBTQIA2+ ideology. First, the push to gay the kids. That was a few years ago. That's old and passé now. Now it's turned into the push to trans the kids. We have story after story about teachers secretly setting up affirming clubs at the schools. Those teachers, and everyone who knew about it, should be arrested, quickly tried, found guilty, and executed for child abuse. That's my humble opinion. We've got counselors and psychiatrists that don't really care what's going on with the kid. They just know that they've likely got gender dysmorphia. So let's get them started on hormones. They should be treated the same as the aforementioned teachers, I think. We've got activists and organizations, media influencers, etc., that are telling the kids that they're obviously in the wrong body, same penalty for them. Cleanse the camp of the evil, that's all I'm saying. Now, If there is any positive, as the U.S. is going full tilt the wrong way in this fight, Europe is starting to change course, finally admitting that maybe, it's a bad idea to trans the kids. Maybe we should just wait a bit before we start pumping them full of hormones and, mutilating them. Those kids in the other group, the heavily Catholic Latin America areas, the Eastern Bloc, Israel, I have a hard time believing they're trying to destroy their kids the same way we are. So is our professor, Mr. Dr. Denev, correct that it's likely due to political polarization, social media, uncertainty about the future, and economic inequality? No, those are stupid reasons, if I'm being honest. The social media is a contributor, but that's really just a message or agenda delivery system. The messaging and the agenda are the real problem. Social media could be used for good, like, roughly speaking, TikTok is used in China as an educational tool rather than an idiocracy tool like is done everywhere else. Kids and young adults constantly being told that they're being slighted, that they're being disregarded, that they're not who they think they are, that, I guarantee, has a much larger effect than the fact that grandpa has more money than grandson. With that, we've only made it through page 33 of the report. I'll let you read the rest of it, much like I absolutely definitely did, every single word, carefully taking it all in, meditating on its ooey gooey data goodness. Link in the notes. Now, all that said, happiness isn't the problem. Problem is joy, peace, and hope. A Pew Research article from 2018 showed that more Eastern Bloc nations felt that religion was an important part of their national identity than did Western European nations. I won't even argue what religion at this point. It's likely heavily Orthodox in the East, but just a belief in a higher power, a creator, a purpose in life. See, without a purpose in life, life is pointless. When you teach your children that they're just intelligent slime or evolved animals, what do you expect? When you ensure your kids know that there are no absolutes, life, death, male, female, none of it matters, pick what you want. There's no way to find peace. When you tell your kids that everything is wrong, that life sucks, that they're being mistreated if they don't get everything right now, how can they find joy? We can ban social media. We can imprison or legally execute all of the trans pushers. We can evenly distribute all of the money, and those actions may move the happiness needle a little. But for every happiness action, there's an opposite and greater unhappiness force just waiting in the wings. If we want to actually affect people, young and old, we must show them Jesus. There's no substitute. There is no other answer. Jesus is the sole path to joy, peace, hope, and love. I won't deny that other religions can offer a mostly hollow substitute of what Christianity can give in full. The concept is there, the execution is poor. So, do the Western nations ever get back to placing true Christianity as the sole guarantor of peace, hope, love, and joy? No. Not as an overall entity, they don't. At least I have a hard time believing that a revival of global proportions will ever take place. I could be wrong, though, admittedly. But that's not really your or my concern, if I'm being honest. If God wants a global revival, guess what? It'll happen. For you and me and most Christians, regardless of where we come from or where we live or any of the seemingly infinite demographics we're being parsed into, our job is to find a solid church, attend faithfully, and give generously of our time, talent, and treasure. The church as an entity, as a denomination or convention or what have you, should work diligently to wisely use every contribution to further the kingdom. We also have an individual mandate to help people out of the swirling death spiral of the never-ending quest for happiness. I have a very good friend, been friends for nearly 30 years. He's not saved. His wife isn't saved. His kids aren't saved. He doesn't like to talk about it. And yet, he's continuously striving and falling well short of happiness. The job isn't right. The wife is a problem. The kids aren't acting correctly. The house, the lawn, the car, it's always something. Over and over, I've shared in relatively small doses that I know is problem. I have a solution for the problem. Over and over again, I get shut down. Politely, usually through, just ignoring the comment. I told him a few months ago that I had the solution for him, but he's not ready for it yet. His life has to dive further into chaos before he'll be willing to listen. I got crickets on that one. And that's okay. My job is not to save my friend. That's the job of the Holy Spirit. My job is to show him a way of peace, hope, joy, and love, which quite often looks nothing like the world's definition of those four things, substituting happiness for joy, of course. Our job is to stay the course. As you go, tell. Friends, family members, co-workers, strangers, as the Holy Spirit directs, and I firmly believe that that looks different for everyone. But as we go, tell. Tell of the hope, the peace, the joy, even in the midst of calamity. Tell of the love you have been given and have for others. In short, as you go, preach the gospel. Happiness is like that specific fleeting scent that you can remember. Everyone has one. Maybe a perfume, the smell of an old book, the salty ocean air, the sting of the clean winter cold. We all have a small library of smells that create certain feelings of euphoria. And then as quickly as it comes, it's gone. Happiness is that fleeting, that fickle type of smell. Jesus told his disciples, and by extension us, in John 15, that he was telling them what he was so that his joy may be in them and that their joy may be complete. And then in John 16, that one day he will see us and we will see him again and no one will take our joy from us. Paul in Romans 14 says that the kingdom of God has nothing to do with eating and drinking, but righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. The world can conduct poll after poll about happiness, and the results will fluctuate up and down year over year. They can speculate, analyze, assume, and develop action plans to fix the happiness problem, and they're only striving after wind, as nothing they'll ever do will bring lasting happiness or even a modicum of joy. True joy comes from salvation by the Holy Spirit through the life, death, and resurrection of Christ and our humble submission of our whole life to our God. Okay, I've got a crazy idea. Now hear me out. Just for a change of pace, let's be Bereans. Chapter 3. Be forewarned. Standard, boilerplate, preamble, incoming. In short, this is the time when I let you in on my thoughts from my time studying my Bible. These are my thoughts, my questions, and my, for lack of a better term, revelations. In some cases, I'll study these more, look into definitions, the original language, cross-references, or the magical internet. In other cases, I'm just jotting down my thoughts. Don't take what I state and wonder aloud as definitely correct. Do your own research, double-check me, and feel free to contact me with any corrections, questions, comments, etc., etc. In other words, you go be a Berean as well. And with that, let's see what we can discuss this week. So let me start here. You know how sometimes you have like random thoughts that just kind of roll back around in your head somewhere? Well, I had one of those the other day, and maybe I've heard this somewhere before, or I've heard parts of it and finally pieced them together in my head, or I don't know, maybe this just struck me, but when I put a little thought into it, I thought of you, and I wanted to share this. Get your thoughts on this, maybe. So I've wondered in the past, and I'm almost positive you have too, why would God allow churches to exist today that don't preach the gospel, that barely preach out of the Bible, that essentially consist of some guy in ripped, skinny jeans bouncing around up front, giving some sort of a TED Talk or a motivational speech, carefully exegeting the latest movie or TV series, or using some silly or stupid or gross illustration to try to make a point that the Bible never made. Think of pastors like Stephen Furtick, Andy Stanley, Perry Noble, Michael Todd, T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen, Creflo Dollar, and so many others. They're just unending. These guys sound Bible-ish. They claim to be a church, but they're not. There's no fear of God. There's no careful exegesis. There's no wisdom. There's no care about the sheep by the pastor or the leadership. It's really just kind of a joke when you come down to it. Not a funny joke either. There are tens of thousands of people who attend these buildings weekly or join online, and they're not being told anything of any use. If someone happens to find their way to salvation while attending a church like this, it's despite the pastor, not because of him or her. And that person would likely leave a place like that shortly after they were saved. But most of the people in these churches are unsaved. They will remain unsaved and they will die in their sins. Why would God allow churches like these to exist? And then I had my epiphany. Most of those churches and pastors and attendees would agree that Jesus taught in parables, so that's why they teach in stories and illustrations and examples, because if it was good enough for Jesus, if that's how he helped people understand, then why not us too? But no, that's the opposite reason Jesus spoke in parables. The reason Jesus spoke in parables was actually to conceal the truth from those who were not of his elect. At the same time, on the other side of the paradox of man's free will and God's sovereign election, parables were told to separate those who were striving to understand and those who legitimately had no interest in the mysteries of the kingdom. In short, these churches are God's condemnation on primarily those who are not his elect, those who willingly reject him. These so-called churches, like all things, are under God's direct sovereign control for his purpose. Out of these, God will save some. There's no doubt about that, but these churches are for those who have no interest in the God of the Bible, only the Jesus that they fashioned in their own image. They're a punishment from God, and they serve a purpose in the economy of God. God's sovereignty extends to all things. No matter the appearance of chaos or confusion, God's sovereignty will not be denied. This concept needs to be remembered and applied across all of life. God is in control. We have no reason to fear, no reason to feel that God is playing from behind, that he's working to figure out his next move. All the moves are God's moves. Anyway, this may not strike you the way it struck me, but maybe it did. And if you're in a church that engages in silliness, that neglects the Bible, preferring the preaching of worldly foolishness, seriously consider getting out and finding a church that fears God, that has reverence for his word, that loves the gospel and loves his sheep. Okay, let's get into the point of this segment. Let's take a look at things that have struck me as I've been doing my Bible reading. Last time we finished up with Leviticus, so in this segment we're starting on Numbers. One thing that struck me and continues to strike me, which hurts and ow, right? While reading my Bible, is the exactness of God. There is precision in everything God does and commands. So take the camping around the tabernacle, for instance. In chapter 2, God gave very specific instructions about how to set up camp. The tabernacle was in the center. The Levites camped around the tabernacle to keep people away from it for two reasons. One, so as to keep anyone from just wandering too close to the tabernacle by accident and having to be put to death. And then two, to stop anyone from intentionally trying to approach the tabernacle, which required the death penalty. Outside of the Levites, the rest of the camps set up in a very specific order. To the north were the tribes of Dan, then Asher, then Naphtali. To the east were Judah, then Issachar, then Zebulun. To the south were Reuben, then Simeon, then Gad. And to the west were Ephraim, then Manasseh, and then Benjamin. The camps to the north and south had a total of about 155,000 men. There's exact numbers, but this is about, right? The camp to the west had about 108,000 men. The camp to the east had about 186,000 men. Now, I've heard it stated that if you were to lay those camps out by size, the resulting shape would be a cross, right? I'll let you decide if that was intentional for that purpose or not. Then, when the Israelites were told to move, it was done very specifically. You have to go into chapter 10 to get some additional details, but you had the east side went first. Then the Levite tribe of Gershon broke down the tent of the tabernacle. Then the Levite tribe of Merari took the framework of the tabernacle. Then the camp to the south went. Then the Levite tribe of the Kohathites took the holy objects, including the ark. Then the camp to the west, and then finally the camp to the north. This is how they traveled every time. And the reason the tabernacle was staggered the way it was that so the framework and the coverings could be in place, ready by the time the holy objects arrived, so as to place them in the safety of the tabernacle immediately. Now, concerning the Levites, recall that God claimed rights over the firstborn of all creation, man and animal. There was a redemption price, either a sacrifice or a payment due to redeem the firstborn. And Moses was told to number the Levites, every male 1 month old or older. That resulting number was 22,000 males. Then Moses was told to number the firstborn males of the Israelites. Well, there were 22,273. So the Levites were taken as the redemption price of the firstborn males. 1 to 1. But God didn't say, close enough. No. There was a deficit of 273. So God set the redemption price at 5 shekels for each additional man. Right? The preciseness of the Bible should be just one more proof of the validity of the reality of the Scriptures. Okay, speaking of the tabernacle, moving into chapter 4 of Numbers, have you ever thought about what a nightmare it would have been to break down and move the tabernacle? Well, we actually find out that there were 8,580 men that were involved with moving the tabernacle. That's nearly triple the number of humans that lived in my hometown when I was growing up. I bet that tabernacle was broken down within, an hour? Maybe less? With that many hands? Again, this may not hit you the same way it does to me, but I've never really thought about how they did it. Just that they did it, and wow, what a pain that would be. But no, with that many people, not really. Not really. Okay, chapter 10, verse 29. We come into some controversy here. It mentions Hobab, or Hobab, I like Hobab better, as the son of Reuel, who was Moses' father-in-law. But we've known that Jethro is Moses' father-in-law. So it appears that both of those names refer to the same person, which really shouldn't be that controversial, as we know that many people had multiple names in the Bible. And in fact, the speculation is that Jethro may actually be a priestly title rather than a formal name. But that brings us to Hobab, who is clearly Moses' brother-in-law, except that in Judges 4:11, he's mentioned as Moses' father-in-law. So one of those must be wrong, right? And yes, right. I mean, clearly, one of those is wrong. Here's the thing. It appears the problem goes back to the original Hebrew. The Hebrew word for father-in-law is hoten. That's H with a dot under it, O with a line over it, T with a line under it, E with a line over it, N. The word for brother-in-law is hatan. That's H with a dot under it, A with a line over it, T with a line under it, A with a line over it, N. To complicate matters more, there were no vowels in ancient Hebrew, so both words would have just been HTN. So Judges 4:11, based on the specificity of Numbers 10:29, is probably a copyist error that's been carried throughout the transcripts. So if someone asks you if there are mistakes in the Bible, you can say that yes, there are a few mistakes in the Bible. You can point this one out, and then ask them how that minor error changes anything. See, copyist errors, misspelling, even errors in translation to small degrees can and has occurred, but that's not what the unsaved care about. They want to extrapolate out an insignificant error like this to say that, well, look at that, you can't trust the Bible. But in no way is there a mistake or a contradiction anywhere in the Bible that compromises the gospel and the core of the Bible, or the context, or the content of the Scriptures. Minor issues like this. Okay, one more, and then I really need to wrap this up. In chapter 11, we find the Israelites complaining about the manna. Now, you and I may think that they're ungrateful, right? But the reality is that we're about 2 years into eating nothing but manna every day. We would do the same thing. We would complain, guaranteed. They wanted meat. So God, like any parent, just loving hearing his children complain about how you take care of them, said that if they want meat, well, they're going to get some meat. So God sent a wind that carried quail. We're talking about a lot of quail. All of them were flying about 3 feet off the ground, so the Israelites simply had to snatch them out of the air. Verse 32 said that the people spent all day, all night, and all the next day gathering quail. It says that the person who gathered the least gathered 10 homers of quail. Do you know the conversion for that? It's about 2,300 liters, or for Americans like me, that's just over 600 gallons of quail per person at the very least. That's a lot of quail. Now, God said that he would send so much quail that it would become loathsome to the Israelites. They would eat so much meat for 30 days straight that it would be coming out of their nostrils. So what would it take to make it loathsome? So quail, I looked it up, is a good bird actually, from what I found. Gives you cellular energy to improve circulation and mood, and apparently it's a cleansing bird. A whole quail has about 140 to 180 calories worth of meat. To loathe something, I mean, I'm taking a guess on this one. Let's say they ate 4,000 calories worth of quail per day. That's at least double what you typically need in a day. That would be coming out of their nostrils, right? I mean, they would just be stuffed to the rafters of quail. Just sick of seeing another stupid bird. So if you were to take 4,000 calories, about 175 calories per quail, say about 2 million people, taking the men and kind of extrapolating, guesstimating out some, that would come out to about 1.4 billion quail. Now, from what I could find online, 1.4 billion quail is the number that are farmed annually these days for meat and eggs. Now, I might be off in my calculations. I'll admit that. Let's say I'm twice as big, twice as high as what the reality was. That's still 700 million quail. No matter how you slice it, God sent a massive amount of quail. Okay, wait, one more. So, you know how John always wrote about himself without using his name, right? The one whom Jesus loved. We also read from John that he outran Peter to the empty tomb. I mean, these almost sound like humble brags, don't they? Now, I won't say they are, maybe the running one, but you could get that vibe, right? Well, in Numbers 12, Moses kind of does the same thing. He's writing about himself, and he says, quote, "Now the man Moses was very humble, more than any man who was on the face of the earth." What's funny is that this statement is in parentheses, and it comes in verse 3, right after Miriam and Aaron complained about Moses taking a Cushite woman as a wife, and then they complained that Moses claimed, or it was attributed to him as being the only one that Yahweh spoke through, when Miriam and Aaron claimed that God spoke through them as well. And then in verse 4, Yahweh chastises them. I guess it's maybe the statement that Moses made is loosely related in there, but it seems like it was kind of just wedged in there. It kind of gives the feeling like Moses was incredulous. He was like, what? Me? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm innocent. I don't know. It just kind of struck me as a funny line to just kind of interject in there about yourself. Okay. That about does it for this episode. Take what I've covered, mull it over, chew it up, eat the meat, the quail, spit out the bones, and like I've said, let me know what you think. Let me know where I'm wrong, where I'm missing something, or whatever. Comment on the episode, shoot me an email, and tell me what you're reading and what interesting things you're finding. Now, get up, get off your duff, and go be a Berean. And with that, sadly, we've reached the end of yet another episode of the Logical Christian Podcast. I feel we've bonded as we've laughed and cried and twisted our faces in incredulity. If you've enjoyed or found value in what you've heard, go on and do all the podcast things. And don't forget to check the show notes for links and contact info. Lawrence J. Peters said, "Against logic there is no armor like ignorance." Jesus told us that if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So stay in the word, stay logical, stay faithful, and until next time, God bless.